Hi everyone, it is so great to be here with you, especially during these trying and challenging times. I'm really glad that we can overcome distance and feel close even when there are thousands of miles between us. Please let me introduce my colleague, Dr. Melina Longoni. She's an Argentinian physician who has specialized in physical medicine and rehabilitation and in hyperbaric medicine. She is a medical director of Redel, a rehabilitation center in Buenos Aires. She's also the director of the disability department in Ituzaingó, Buenos Aires, and president of the Latin American Medical Association for Rehabilitation. She has many, many more titles and achievements, but the greatest of them is being an awesome person, and I am so proud to call her my friend. Hi, Meli, how are you?
Hi, Rami. Thank you so much for that introduction. I now will introduce you. Ramiro Mitre is an amazing person that I've met this past year. He's also Argentinian, he's a psychologist, and he also has a degree in education. He wears many hats. He has a master's degree in autism spectrum disorders, and he's a professor at the university. He works as a trainer, supervisor, and therapeutic teams coordinator. And he's a professional advisor for the Neurodiversidad, Fundación Neurodiversidad. It's a foundation. He runs also a postgraduate program on autism in Argentina, and has over 12 years of professional clinical and research experience with dissertations, academic presentations, certifications, and continuing education courses in Argentina, Chile, Uruguay, Spain, United States, Canada, and England.
Thank you so much. So today we will be talking about the situation in our region. We'll begin by summarizing a few aspects about climate and its impact on Latin America, and then we will tell you a little more about Argentina in particular. We know that temperature of the Earth has increased by 34 degrees since pre-industrial times, and it continues to rise to the point where the last 5 years have become the warmest on record. Let me share my screen so we can show the presentation.
Some of the things that we are going to show you today are from Argentina, but some of the things happen all over Latin America. You're going to see that we have similar contrast between poverty and more rich sides of the community. So we are going to show you some things that are mainly in Argentina, but are very common in all of Latin America.
So we know that one of the effects of global warming that can be already noticed is flooding. According to the Inter-American Development Bank, flooding was the most frequent natural disaster in South America between 1970 and 2013. Aside from the economic losses, which only in January of last year were estimated in about $2.5 billion, people are forced to evacuate their homes, and sometimes they don't even know if there will be one to return to.
Well, these are some of the pictures in Argentina that happened a few years ago in a city near Buenos Aires, which is near the capital of Argentina, which is La Plata. And well, we can see the signs from the streets and the level of the water. This was really, really a disaster for us because it had an impact mainly in those places where people were living with very low incomes. And this has a very close relationship between disability as well. So it has a very, very big impact on disability and also in people with low incomes.
So in 2010, a patient's family had to leave their home because of the flood in our city. Of course, it was a traumatic experience for everyone, but it took its toll on my 8-year-old autistic patient. As many of you probably know, one of the characteristics of autism is the need for sameness. Not only did this kiddo have to leave the comfort of home to a place crowded with unfamiliar people, but he also had to face an absolute change of routines, which ended in extreme emotional reactions, self-harming behaviors, and even a harder time for that family. Along with the team, we were able to assist them. He could calm down once we were able to explain the situation, and they eventually returned home. The thing is, events like this often have a more negative impact on people with disability, and we as practitioners should be really aware of that. While in some areas it rains cats and dogs, some other, often within the same country, have to experience exactly the opposite. And we're talking about droughts. One of the clear examples is Chile, where the mega drought has been going on for more than a decade now due to the lack of rain. This crisis affects 7 of the 16 regions in the country, but if we go up north, the situation is not so different in Central America. This zone, which we call the Dry Corridor, which is a coastal area that borders the Pacific Ocean, where 90% of Central American population lives. It goes from southern Mexico to Panama, through Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, and part of Costa Rica. Although droughts are always expected at the beginning of the year due to a climate phenomenon called El Niño, the United Nations Environment's Climate Change Coordinator for Latin America has stated that climate change has made it a truly impossible situation. In southern Argentina and Chile, we have huge glaciers that also play a role in droughts. They concentrate water in the rainy season, freeze it, and then distribute it along the year through the rivers. When the ice retreats, and it is every day, the cycle is lost or slowed down. Latin America is also the home of other complex phenomena, and global warming can contribute to creating the appropriate condition for disasters. Among these disasters, we can mention hurricanes and the huge impact they have on communities. It would only be enough for us to say Mitch, Katrina, or Maria for people to think of death, economic losses, and despair. As far as we know, the scientific community has not agreed on whether climate change has increased the frequency of hurricanes, but what we do know is that there's more consensus that the effects of global warming, such as increased ocean temperatures and rising sea levels, are likely to be stronger and more devastating. Polar ice melting and water temperature increases lead to rising sea levels. This means that flooding will be more common, and there are some areas in Panama, for instance, that already started moving people to other locations because water started taking over the land, and that's really, really terrible. Sadly, we don't have to go to Panama to experience the tragic effects of global warming. Here you can see some footage of what's going on just a few miles away from where we are. This is happening as we speak in Córdoba, a beautiful province in the central part of Argentina. These forest fires began in early July. As in this area winters are very dry, little fires were usually common. But during the last years, the situation started getting worse and worse. Some of these fires start because of negligence. Some people make careless mistakes, like forgetting to put out a bonfire or throwing cigarette butts, but most of the forest fires are intentional. In some cases, the objective is to convert the soil to use it for agricultural or livestock production. In other cases, intentional fires occur for construction purposes. In any case, it all contributes to the deforestation of the native forests in Argentina, and we know how that impacts directly on global warming and temperature rise, which leads to a vicious circle in terms of fires. By the beginning of September, fires had wiped out over 100,000 acres. Today, the situation is still out of control. Even though last week there were some rains, the spring brought unusually high temperatures that made fires even worse. Many lives were lost, and the tireless work of firefighters, the community, police, and local administration doesn't seem to be enough.
As we told you before, Latin America is a land of contrasts. This actually is a picture of the entrance of the city of Buenos Aires, where you can see exactly that a main street divides poor region people living in these what we call villages, but actually is where really poor people live, And we can see from the other side of the street those buildings which are the most expensive places actually in Buenos Aires. We know that disability is related to poverty, and this has worse outcomes for all the people with disabilities. So here we can see a study that was made last year, so this data is already old, that we can see that in the past few years, poverty has been increased, and also people living in the streets. And this is even worse this year because we have new data that poverty has been increasing very much for the last few months due to COVID-19 pandemic. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the disability and the context of disability here in Argentina. We know that there are around 5,100,000 people with disabilities in Argentina. This has a very big impact in health and in resources. We know that 15.3 million are impacted because we're talking not only about the people with disability, but also of the family and the family environment. We know that there's 20.6% of households have at least one people with disability or one person with disability. 38.4% do not have health insurance. 75% of the person with disability are employed, and this is very important because we know that there's not very much opportunities. There are not many opportunities for people with disabilities to work, and also only 7% of the people have a tertiary or university degrees, talking about the persons with disabilities. So one of the things that I wanted to show you, this is one of our trips to a really awesome but really covered region of Argentina, which is, the name is Impenetrable Chaqueño. Its name is Sausalito. We can see here that it's very, very hard to get in. There's an 8-hour trip in these buses that you can see. And also there's a lot of things that can go wrong. You have no cell reception when you are getting in. So if something happens, you are lost in the middle of the jungle. And also it rains profusely. So when you're traveling, the bus you have to get it down of the bus. That is one of the things that happened to us. That picture is one of from one of our trips, that you have to get down of the bus and start pushing it. And you can see how the people live there. And also these people have no electricity. And you can see that they don't have refrigerators, they don't have light. So disability it's even worse for these people. This is actually a house of a person with disability. Actually, she's deaf. She's the mom of 3 kids, and she lives here. So you can imagine the way that they're living. These are some of the pictures that you can see. In the bottom left, you can see that's meat. Actually, from its name is charqui. That because when people have no fridges, they leave the meat outside and let it dry so they can eat it, because they don't have they cannot put the meat into the refrigerator. And in the right, you can see a boy trying to purify some water so they can drink, because they don't have water to drink from. They have to take it from rain or lakes around where they are living. And another thing that I wanted to show you is the picture on the upper left side. It's actually a classroom of kids with disabilities in this town. You can see that they don't have classes according to their disabilities. They're all together, and this is one of the things that is happening there, that most of the kids don't have diagnosis, and they all work together because they don't have the possibilities to do something else. So this has a great impact on the outcomes of these little kids with disabilities. Well, to tell you something nice, really nice about our country is that we have a lot of climates. We have the Iguazu Falls, we have fountains, we have mountains, we have glaciers, and actually all of these things are changing. We know that climate change is affecting the glaciers, is also affecting the snow on the peaks of our mountains, and all of these things are having a lot of impact in our environment and how the people are living. And this is very important for people with disabilities.
Great, thank you so much, Meli. Before we finish, I'd like to talk a little bit about something really important. It doesn't have to do with Argentina or South America, but it's related to my work. As you said before, I work with people with autism, and one of the many things autistic people and their families have taught me is that the condition is way more than communicational or behavioral challenges. Many of you probably know Greta Thunberg. She is a 17-year-old Swedish girl. She became widely known because of her activism on climate change. She acknowledges that autism is her superpower to fight climate change. Restricted interests are a core characteristic of autism spectrum disorders, and as we see, it doesn't mean it's necessarily a bad thing. Greta said she has found meaning in a world that often seems shallow and senseless, and that is in part because of the way her brain works. She says she only talks when it's necessary, and she considers that right now it is. So to tell you a little bit about her, she heard about climate change for the first time when she was really young, and it became an obsession. First, she was clinically depressed. She lost a lot of weight, and her parents were really worried about that. She started changing things around her in her life, and she started convincing her family to become vegan, to use sustainable energy, to stop flying, and only buy things that are extremely necessary. In 2018, she stopped going to school, and instead she would go to the Swedish parliament with a sign that said, "School strike for climate." That's a picture we can see right now. She asked the administration to reduce carbon emissions, and the story attracted the press. She became popular in social media and quickly gained international impact. She founded a movement called Fridays for Future, which thousands of people joined, and she started raising her voice in front of many world leaders. I'm talking about Greta for two main reasons. The first one is because of her commitment, strength, and empowerment in her fight for climate change, but also because she said out loud she's autistic. Not only does it help to make the condition more visible, but it also helps overcome some wrong ideas about it. It is real that people with disability may suffer a greater impact due to climate change, but it is also true that some of them are taking action, and they should be given credit for the amazing contribution they are making, not only for people with disabilities, but for all of us. We know that maybe the information we've shared today is rather upsetting, and we know that the future doesn't seem so promising, but there's also a bright side to everything. Climate change worries us all, but it also brought us together today. Day for Tomorrow is an event to gain awareness, but it's also a day of community and hope. So we would like to present someone really special for us. Meli?
Well, actually, we're going to present Mr. Esteban Echanis. He's a singer here from Argentina, and he's going to perform a song that he made himself, actually for all of the people with disabilities, and also with the families and all of us that work with people with disabilities. The song is in Spanish, so we'll try to translate it and subtitle for you. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you so much, and please subscribe to Sustainability's YouTube channel.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
¿Cómo contarte tanto cariño? ¿Cómo te explico todo ese amor? Manos dispuestas hacia los otros que nada esperan en su dolor. Vidas en pena que hoy necesitan tan solo un gesto, una razón. Son su alegría, su vida nueva, cuando en sus actos florece Dios. Juntos el destino vamos a enfrentar el duro camino de aprender y acompañar con ese que puede y el que no da más. Juntos esta vida vuelve a comenzar. Juntos el destino vamos a enfrentar el duro camino de aprender y acompañar con ese que puede y el que no da más. Juntos esta vida vuelve a comenzar. La gran familia, todo se siente al aceptar este presente. Juntos saldremos con la esperanza de que ese día todo se alcanza. Juntos el destino vamos a enfrentar el duro camino de aprender y acompañar con ese que puede y el que no da más. Juntos esta vida vuelve a comenzar. Juntos el destino vamos a enfrentar.